not sure. Next week's gonna be busy with the holidays, so I thought we'd get the video out of the way. And I wanted to address the culture or the understanding of the game that we've inherited here in the US that's completely different from how the game is moving in top cultures, whether that be, Spain, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, certainly Brazil, right? Japan, right? Even some parts of Africa, as applied analysis kind of penetrates into the culture. And what you're going to get in the United States is the basic understanding, cultural understanding in terms of tactical analysis, right? So it's going to be based on positions. It's going to be based on structure, right? And elementary, non-principle driven adjustments, right? So this team is playing 4-3-3. This team is playing 4-2-3-1. And you want to look at almost like not the meta level, not the principles. The principles are very fixed, right? You want to look beneath at the micro level, matchups, certain scenarios. So if you think about the game as matchups of structural formations, right, then the solutions are certain scenarios. And the game generation, not generations ago, but in the last 20 years, the game's moved beyond the positional play understanding, right? Now, look, if you're Man City and you can buy $1 billion worth of players, right, then you can play a very, very positional structured game, and the solutions are fairly basic because the solutions aren't really what matters, right? At that point, if every one of your players is world class at every position, you see it in the Champions League all the time, right? You see Real Madrid and Man City and Liverpool, maybe not so much Liverpool, but you see a lot of the big teams playing a certain way, mostly positionally, right? But now, even now, after Pep won the Champions League, weighted more or more reliant on more fluid play. And he's even taken a step towards even more fluid play this year. And you've seen teams like Liverpool taking on more dispositional play, not so much fluid play, but some gegenpressing and dispositional play, right? So less rigid zonal commitment on both sides of the ball, right? And Liverpool had a lot of success with that. And so they play a hybrid system. And even Paris Saint-Germain, right? So a much more fluid system versus positional system when they got rid of Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, right? So, they have structure, especially in the wing and three center backs, right? But after that, there's a lot less structure. It looks somewhat, it looks one or two deviations more fluid than your Madrids, your Man Cities, your Liverpool, right? Those five attacking players are very fluid. They can be all together, they can spread out, whatever it is. So these systems are driven by principles, right? So you got your German and English coaches that are looking for positional weakness, right? Their concept is that 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, right? Overload the middle. Very rarely invert the backs, maybe invert the backs, rotate a little bit, and now you solved, right, the structural The problem is how do you play when the other team is playing based on principles? Their disposition is high. They zone high block. They have press triggers. They transition to man-to-man. Their press triggers are based on the shape of confrontation or the height of the defender. They have a lock zone press where they can squeeze you. If you don't like going backwards, then you get trapped. Is the backwards ball a press trigger? Are they going to gegenpress? So look, it's like a guerrilla war versus a modern army, right? If the other side just doesn't line up and fight, then what do? You have no principles to fall back on. And now you're reliant on the defense's structural flaws against a principle-driven team. The structure of the defense could differ based on who's carrying the ball and what side of the field they're on. Right? On the right foot, maybe they play one way. On the left foot, they play another way. In the balls in the middle, they play another way. They're not going to press. They have press triggers and they have press releases. So they're not going to be provoked into shape, into lining up and then defending. And if you see it in futsal, and so you see a lot of countries that are reliant on futsal for development, right? Which is basically the Excel's protocol. That's another video, right? But if you want to look it up, what the optimal developmental game is 40 feet by 80 feet, 5v5, right? The way a futsal team brings in the goals to play a little more intense on the futsal court, that kind of shape. So if you play that kind of a game, very quickly there's no structure to rely on, and the teams that do play with a structure don't succeed. So there's no structure to rely on in terms of the solutions that you're looking for. You have to have organization and principles. And what you're trying to do in, say, the build-up phase is based on principles, right? So how wide are your center backs and why? Which players are responsible for the ball and how fluid are they, right? You can tell an outside back to invert, right? Based on looking at space and counting players and understanding the zone of the defense, maybe, right? But if you look at Fluminense, they invert the outside back based on the relationship with the ball and the intensity of the engagement of the press. So it has nothing to do with looking at the space and the shape and counting who's marking the pivots, who's not, what the forwards are doing, how many forwards are there. Nothing to do with, is it 4-2-3-1, and this is how I expect them to respond, right? It has to do with where's the ball, how much pressure's on the ball. And if there's enough pressure on the ball, I'm going to invert. I'm going to go to the ball. I'm going to get off the wing, right? And then the inversion might trigger rotation. So there's no meta understanding of what the overall structure is, and that triggers the decision. That makes no sense, right? It's based on what's happening in the game in the immediate vicinity. Who's offering structure, who's off the ball, and who's on the ball. And the solutions depend on an underlying understanding of pressure on the ball and shape relative to pressure. So that's one. And positional play only comes into, only gets triggered when there's no pressure on the ball and the other defense is zone out. You can look for the free man. There's going to be a free man. You play positionally because the other side isn't a strict zone defense. It's in some kind of block. That's not going to be the case anymore. Going forward, there's going to be mixed zones. There'll be zone blocks. There'll be zone presses. They're going to be blitzes, like in American football. Triggers. They're going to be releases, like fake blitzes. And by the same token, they're going to be draws, right? A 4-0 is a draw. 4-0 automation is a draw. It's very similar to an option offense in football. So there's going to be draws and options and pump fakes and all the stuff, pick and rolls. It's going to be all that from the set piece games and even from the set piece / inbound based games like basketball, right? So those principles that have been developed in other sports are going to dwarf. So this is disposition, how high your line is, how close your pivots are, how many pivots there are, how wide your center backs are, how wide your pivots are, right? There's going to be disposition based on two things. One, the relative strength of the teams. So you're not looking for structural weakness or positional weakness. Understanding the meta relative strength of the teams. The meta relative strength of the teams means that you want more people in the middle. If you're the weaker team, you want more people in the middle, but you want them optimally spread apart. So your center backs might split, but you might have more 3 pivots to secure the spine, right? That has nothing to do with the structural weakness. And then you'll be very fluid on the ball because there's no free man, right? The free man is a third man. When the ball gets passed, the free man in positional play is in motion. When the ball gets passed, the free man is the third man. They've taken up a position either behind the press or between the lines, not in the press trap, between the lines, so they can receive the ball on the diagonal. The diagonal meaning not a diagonal ball. The diagonal meaning the shortest front foot pass. If you think about that's what the diagonal means. So those are principal adjustments. So if you think about positional play, the free man's in the press trap, invariably, right? And that's where the solutions, the cultural solutions, are just wrong. If you think of the game as reading positional or structural weaknesses, and you don't understand the underlying principles, right? And other cultures get it from street ball because their kids play street ball, the coaches play street ball, so they understand, they've seen these things, whether they have a name for them or not. But if you're looking at defensive structural flaws, you come up against a real coach, those aren't going to exist. No coach in the future is going to line up 4-2-3-1, try and press high, and defend with four lines. And then you think, oh, I play 4-3-3 against your 4-2-3-1. Now I'm outnumbered in the middle, and I might invert a fullback, and now I've got a solution. Ridiculous. This is not how. You're not even viewing the game, right? You say, oh, I'm observing, I'm looking with intention. I don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? Look, it's not about positions. So it's very interesting. Fluminense did a podcast with modern soccer coach, and you can see in the background their developmental methodology on the wall, right? It has to do with velocity and tempo. It has to do with fluidity and principles. It has to do with degrees of control, right? Structure off the ball. Not positional structure, control, fluid structure, right? Autonomous decision making, not structured in terms of positions. Based on triggers, based on automation triggers, right? So sub-positional automations that trigger the decisions, the technique triggers automations for all the players in the immediate vicinity. Again, some players are responsible for structure. Some players are responsible for off the ball movement, third man runs, and third man positions, right? And then some players are on the ball, responsible for the ball. And within the responsibility for the ball, there's certain techniques and certain automations that trigger certain events based on the position and disposition of the defense, based on the meta disposition of the game. You're not looking for this structure, and where the matchups are, and then trying to win a matchup. It depends. The solution is not trying to leverage a one-on-one. It's just not. It's about managing the disposition of the team, the width and depth, right? Depending on the principles, the pivots and center backs. Depending on the principles, the structure, who's on the ball, right? And then it's very fluid. So you're leveraging the qualities of the players. And what you're going to see, right, is far less structured pressing traps, right? Far less structured build-up. And you're going to have no positions. Everyone's going to be rotating. And so now this is where the meta understanding of the game becomes important, because there's 11 baseline formations. Those kind of morph into 29 other variants, right? But within those 11 or 29, however you want to look at it, at every position, there's 3 differentiated roles, 3 ways to play. There's 3 positions to every position. And then once you have those in place, you know how, at every position, you know how to adapt and what the principles of play are. Not just positional play, but dispositional play. Not just positional play, but fluid play, right? At every position, there's 3 different ways to play. Now you can play any formation, and then the formations can change based on what the immediate demands and solutions of the game are in game. So you might be playing 6 to 9 formations. Arteta said 36, 6 to 9 conventional formations or conventional structures within a game, depending on what's going on. And so that requires each player to be able to play 3 different positions in essence from their initial starting position. If you're just looking for tactical weakness based on conflicting structures and mismatches, you are missing the boat entirely. And your solutions are not going to be there, because you're just fundamentally misunderstanding the game. And it's very clear from Fluminense's methodology where they're going, right? Leveraging dispositional to fluid play. And some of the teams that are implementing this, St. Pauli, Leverkusen, and Paris Saint-Germain in certain areas, right? So now Leverkusen, so that would be now Madrid, right? Madrid is going, although they were 1 or 2 phases beyond strict positional play, they're going to leverage very, very fluid play as Xavi implements the system more, right? So it's about velocity, third man runs, third man positions, fluid overloads, right? The disposition of the center backs and the pivots, rotations and automations, principal play. There're just not going to be any positions anymore. There's certainly not going to be any positions with formations, because you're going to play 9 to 36 formations a game. Anyway, at the TacBot AI, so we have our AI will explain all this. Reach out, comment, and we'll send you a link if you want to